Part 94. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 935. With enough nutrient solution, this is the foundation for everything. Memory it down. Dongpi Lan repeated Galen's explanation outside the door. Her memory seemed to be good, and she remembered everything after listening to it only once. She left soon, seemingly looking for materials somewhere. But when the sound outside came, Garen realized that he was wrong. There were faint exclamations from people outside. The leader is out. Why is she out in such danger? Come back quickly. Sister. People shouted over and over again, but seemed not to hear Dongpi Lan's response. It won't take more than 10 minutes. Thank God. Chief, you can't take any more risks. You are our only hope. Chief. Chief. There were panicked sounds one after another, mixed with Dongpi Lan's constant apologies. Garen raised his head, and suddenly, all the pain in his body disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Time, 7:22. It's finally over. Garen breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat with his hands. He felt that there seemed to be some difference in the 2 marks on his back. He found a mirror and looked at himself. Under the control of his consciousness, a greatly changed consciousness mark slowly emerged from behind. What was originally 2 marks has now turned into one larger hole. It was originally a diamond shape, and now it has also turned into the shape of a small wild wolf, with black body and green eyes. It seems to be pretty good, quite ferocious. Is this the weapon mark? Garen once again tried to calculate the 3-dimensional calculation model for the promotion of the 3rd level of the weapon master. Sure enough, it didn't feel as easy as it was before. It was completely different from the previous difficulty. If I have enough time, I can reach the level of 3rd level energy master in just 5 days, he simply calculated the progress in his mind. Sure enough, the computing power increased by 3 times is different. We found the materials. Dongpi Lan's voice came from outside the door, calm and a little tired. Garen stood up, walked over and opened the door. He looked at Dongpi Lan, whose hair was messy and stuck to her forehead. This fierce woman's expression remained unchanged, and there was a faint trace of blood on her cheek. It was obvious that going out was not completely smooth. The tight-fitting gray combat uniform she was wearing also had several cuts. There were faint traces of blood visible on the skin inside. Take me there. Garen opened the door and said only the sentence. Next to the processing workshop behind Lion Town, a small square pit was dug in an open space. There were some messy materials piled in it, including tree roots, flowers, bloody meat, and bones. Garen and Dongpi Lan stood alone in front of the small pit. What do you want to do? Dongpi Lan looked at Garen. I've found everything for you. There is still one last thing missing, Garen said calmly. Is it still missing? Dongpi Lan opened his eyes wide. Several of my brothers have died. I almost died outside for these things, and now you are telling me that you are still missing. What is missing is not something you can find, Garen said calmly. Now we are all on the same rope. If you die, I will die. What's the rush? Dongpi Lan wiped his face. Okay, I'll calm down. There are already several waves of small-scale tentative attacks outside, and the number is about a dozen. But when I went out, I saw through the telescope that Vulture Town has been basically digested, and the people inside it seems that Carrie has started to move out and is coming this way. We don't have much time. How long? Approximately, Garen asked. It will not exceed 3 days at most. Although the number of human hunters has increased, their speed has also slowed down. It takes 5 days to walk from Vulture Town. Considering that the human hunters are very fast, then give them 3 days, it's about the same amount of time to travel, so the error won't be big, Dongpi Lan replied in a low voice. Wait, there will be hope. Garen jumped down and started to pick up a material and process it with his hands. From time to time, his hands flashed with wisps of cold energy radiation, freezing some of the good quality parts of the material to prevent go bad. Dongpi Lan didn't know how to deal with it, so he could only stand and watch. "Prepare a room for me, a bigger one," Garen ordered. "Good." Time passed by minute by minute. "It's time to have breakfast." Radiation people are accustomed to eating 2 meals a day, one around 90 in the morning and one at 6 or 7 in the evening. But now the women in charge of food and drinks are bringing food to them, but not many people have an appetite. There were children who silently helped to add food and water. Galleons are directly those nutrient solutions with high radiation content. As soon as he grabbed it with his hand, blue threads poured out from his palm, directly absorbing the nutrient solution until only impurities and useless substances remained. Time passed quickly, and soon noon arrived. Garen looked at the sky from time to time. He was waiting for the drone released by Xylin. If he was lucky, maybe the distance from the Aurora domain to here could be reached today. Dongpi Lan has already gone to help with the defense, and the atmosphere in the town is already a bit desperate. Without her in charge, something might happen. Garen stayed here alone, quietly processing the materials in his hands. There were 2 large basins beside it, containing the parts he had processed. The manhunters are constantly approaching. There is definitely a level 2 manhunter among the army. When Garen saw the fate of the escaped Custer, he knew he had hit the jackpot. There is actually a level -2 manhunter who is one of the best in a million. According to records, a level 2 human hunter will produce an idea force similar to a force field of consciousness, which can act on objects and produce substantial effects. This was the scene that everyone saw at that time. Custer was directly crushed by an invisible force and died without a complete body. Now that the energy mark is available, most of the materials are also available. The only thing missing is the biochemical pool. Garen raised his head and looked at the gray-blue sky. This was already the 15th time he looked up at the sky today. This time, the endless sky did not disappoint him. A small blue dot is flying towards this direction at high speed. It looks like a drone. A smile finally appeared on Garen's face. If he didn't come back, he might have to consider consuming a soul seed to be reincarnated. He quickly jumped up from the pit and ran to find Dongpi Lan, asking her to tell everyone not to shoot drones in the sky. But at this moment, as he just ran out of the back of the town, he faintly noticed that something was wrong. There was actually no one inside the houses in the town. It seemed that everyone was concentrated at the front, and there were faint screams from the front. From a distance, Dongpi Lan saw Garen running out. "Be careful! Someone is sneaking in." "It's invisible," she yelled. "Invisible manhunt." Garen was shocked. This was a rare species among humans. How come it's also here? He suddenly felt a deep chill coming from behind. "Turn around, whip your legs, release the cold air." 3 coherent and smooth steps came out instantly. Garen felt as if he had kicked something hard. With a muffled sound, a large amount of cold air quickly spread all over his body, and the white frost completely revealed it. This humanoid-like creature was kicked hard in the head, staggered a few steps, fell to its knees in a daze, and then continued to be flooded by the white air that followed, and was directly frozen into a large piece of ice. Garen glanced at his trouser legs, which were bloody. With his physical condition, he actually suffered a loss in the head-on confrontation just now. Moreover, the bones still hurt a little, and there seemed to be some bone fractures. Is this the invisible manhunt? He took a closer look at this thing. It had the same appearance as a human, but it had no hands. There were 2 thick octopus-like tentacles on the arms. Dongpi Lan also rushed over with his people and gasped when he saw the ice on the ground. "This is the guy who killed 8 of my brothers and sisters," she raised her hand and shot, causing the ice to burst. Wow! The entire ice cube shattered into countless pieces like glass. Garen glanced behind Dongpilan and saw that there were still more than 10 people left. It seems that these are the remaining people in the entire town. There were also several children and women covered in blood who were trembling slightly. What about the rest? They're all dead, Dongpilan replied in a low voice. Her face was also covered in blood. She didn't know whether it was someone else's or her own. The invisible manhunter got in at some point, and by the time we found out, it had already killed most of the logistics workers. It also killed a few of the men who rushed over, Old Man Mei Long said with a pale face. At this moment, the drone whined down from the sky and landed head-on towards Garen. Someone reflexively raised his gun and aimed it. Don't shoot, Garen yelled quickly. Everyone relaxed a little. Watching Garen reach out to grab the small drone and take out a small black box the size of a fist. Take care, he whispered the code into the black box. With a snap, the box opened automatically, and the lid slowly lifted, revealing a round thing wrapped in white silk inside. Garen reached out and took out this thing and threw the other things to Dongpilan. This thing can be used as a reconnaissance drone. What is that? Dongpilan looked at the ball in his hand. This is hope. Garen didn't even look back to answer, and ran quickly towards the back of the town. Following the branch road between the houses in the town, he returned directly to the pit at the back. Garen picked up the processed material basin and walked into a larger, empty stone house on the right. This stone house happened to have a basement. It was the residence left by a man who died in the war. He had no wife or children, so he was assigned to Galen as a laboratory. Uncovering the fist-sized object in his hand, it was a mass of black stone. Garen grabbed the stone with both hands, moved it to both sides, and exerted force. Click. With a crisp sound, the stone was split into two, and a piece of light yellow soft meat suddenly fell out. He was caught in Garen's hand. This is it. Myra cells, the main body of the stony heart biochemical pool. Garen knew that he finally saw hope in the predicament in front of him. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 936. The stone core meat feels like a ball of soft and warm cotton in your hands. Garen held it and smelled a faint fragrance that seemed to come from his arms. It was not transmitted from the air, but the smell really came from his arms. This feeling is very strange. It was as if his palm suddenly turned into a nose, and he even seemed to feel something similar soft touching the end of his nose. He walked to the middle of the basement, put the stone core aside, picked up the basement shovel and started digging on the ground. This is inside a stone house, so the excavated ground is also part of the entire stone. Galen dug a small hole and stopped. Then he picked up the stone core meat on the side and put it in gently like sowing seeds. After placing the stone core meat, he took out a black flower branch with several small black fruits on it, and gently crushed the small fruits. A few drops of black juice slowly dripped down the fingers onto the upper surface of the stone heart meat. Hiss. A clear white steam evaporated, carrying a pungent and choking smell. Suddenly, the stone heart meat began to slowly squirm, like an extremely viscous liquid. It began to spread and flow around, covering a large area of the surrounding land. Within a few minutes, a large piece of light yellow flesh film covering the ground was formed, and it was still stirring slightly. Garen stood at the edge and waited quietly. As time passed, the flesh membrane on the ground gradually became darker and slightly gray. Tear apart. A hole slowly opened in the center of the fleshy membrane, and water vapor seemed to be coming out of it. Garen's eyes were fixed on that place, that crack-like place, and he couldn't see anything dark inside. As time goes by, the crack becomes larger and wider. Gradually, the entire crack slowly formed a large circular pit with a diameter of about 2 to 3 meters, and the color of the entire fleshy membrane gradually changed to black. It no longer squirms and becomes more rigid and solid. Garen once again took out the two halves of the stone ball shell containing the stone heart meat, gently peeled some powder, and sprinkled it evenly on the four corners of the meat membrane that had turned into a black pool of flesh. Suddenly, the flesh pool that was still moving slightly stopped moving completely and became more solid and condensed. "It's become my biochemical pool," Garen felt relieved. Finally, according to the records on the energy mechanic training method, his first biochemical pool was finally successful. Although the whole process is very simple, he has always been worried. After all, this thing is the key to whether he can survive this crisis. Quickly bring in the prepared biochemical pool nutrient solution and slowly pour it in along the edge of the biochemical pool. Several mixed biochemical liquids were quickly mixed together. Garen squatted down and slowly released his energy master consciousness. The energy mark on the back of the brain suddenly disappeared, and suddenly decomposed into a large transparent silk thread, densely piercing the edge of the biochemical pool, like needles swimming and trembling among the flesh and blood of the biochemical pool, forming many veins and blood vessels. Something bulging. A virtual light screen slightly appeared in front of Garen's eyes. "The wild wolf mark is ready, please name your biochemical pool." The message text was displayed on the light screen. "Let's call him Wild Wolf No. 1. Garen chose a name at random to make it easier to remember. Wild Wolf No. 1 has been determined, the biochemical tank has been filled with biochemical fluid, and the analysis level is basic level 1. It can cultivate first level organisms 15 times, and needs to be replenished later. The relevant information and data of the biochemical pool are displayed on the light screen. Please place space tissue." Garen stood up, with the mark of the energy weapon on his body still in the biochemical pool. He went out and brought in the flesh and blood of the mutated beast's body that he had prepared in advance, dragged it and threw it into the black biochemical pool. Plop! The mutated beast that looked like a wild boar was directly submerged in the biochemical liquid, and soon melted like a candle. A series of tiny bubbles continued to emerge from the biochemical pool, as well as weird sounds like gurgling. "After acquiring the basic organization, do you want to start making wild wolf units?" was displayed again on the light screen. Garen answered yes with consciousness. This light screen suddenly dissipated. This was a virtual light screen that was directly connected through consciousness and presented in front of the energy mechanic. It could not be seen by anyone other than the energy mechanic himself. This also ensures the high degree of mystery and safety of the energy mechanic to a certain extent. The information fed back by Garen from his consciousness can control the progress of the biochemical pool at any time, and he can stop and restart at any time. According to the control number of a standard energy weapon master, as a second-level energy weapon master, he can only control one mark, which means he can only control one cannon fodder. If there is a test bed, he can create elite units, which are the elite versions of cannon fodder. However, the test bench is not something he can obtain now. It requires a lot of materials and the technical requirements are also very high. Generally, only very wealthy mechanics dare to build a test bench at a low level, because they can use space tools to carry them with them. Take these things with you. To put it simply, when the energy mechanic is at the low level, he actually does the work of the ancient modulator, but takes a simple biochemical route, because the elite version of the biochemical machinery is the patent of the test bench, and generally the energy mechanic cannot be used at high levels. Just don't think about anything. In addition, this profession itself requires abnormal computing power. A person without talent will be a low-level energy mechanic in his life. Being able to reach the third level and fourth level is considered good, not to mention the higher level 5 level and inheritance level or above. Most of the general energy mechanics on the market have level 3 as the limit, because the entry requirements for energy mechanics are too high, and the time consumed will also increase exponentially. Therefore, if you don't have talent, you will need a lot of time to practice. This has also resulted in the fact that many energy masters are only third level or fourth level energy masters in their 70s or 80s. Level 4 is almost the limit of talent that ordinary people can achieve. But Garen is different. He has potential points that can increase his intelligence and calculation ability. Even with his current talent and calculation ability, he is still at the top level among ordinary energy mechanics, a standard genius. You must know that energy mechanics themselves are only computational geniuses. Only those at the hegemonic level can take on this role, and the geniuses among the masters are the terrifying top geniuses among ordinary people. A series of information about the situation flashed through Garen's mind, but his eyes were fixed on the changes in the biochemical pool. The milk-colored biochemical fluid that was put in began to roll. The corpse of the mutated beast just thrown in has completely dissolved, and now some small, algae-like floating objects are beginning to appear on the surface of the liquid. And as time goes by, these floating objects are increasing. A faint fishy smell began to slowly emerge from the basement, a bit like the smell of mutton, but also a bit like the smell of sea fish. Garen's expression did not change. He just stared at the biochemical liquid in the biochemical pool quietly, waiting for the results. At the same time, he also had to carefully calculate how much time it would take to cultivate. After all, the conditions here are not standard conditions. The biochemical liquid, we also looked for many alternatives, and the culture environment did not have the equipment to maintain optimal temperature, humidity, radiation, etc. In such an environment, the general data on the recorded data loses its meaning, and an actual operation is required to calculate the unit time. Lion Town in the distance. Large groups of human hunters were slowly approaching on foot, numbering in the tens of thousands. The first ones to appear among them were riding motorcycles behind them, and they kept making incomprehensible roars as if they were supervising them. The entire team was not hunting very fast, but their numbers were densely packed, reaching the sky to the ground, as if the entire grassland field of vision was completely occupied. A number of over 10,000 simply looks like a large area. Vulture Town has become history. It was completely reduced to ruins behind the crowds of humans and hunters. There was not a single living person inside. Bones and rotting flesh were everywhere, and uneaten skulls and stumps were scattered on the ground. There were dried and black blood stains everywhere on the wall, the floor, and the door. 2 sections of human intestines were used as ropes to tie to the door knocker. They were used as ropes. It took countless people to find the intestines and twist them into the thickness of a forearm. It looks very tough and somewhat black. Quack. A group of scavenger crows descended, fluttering their wings and hopping around from time to time, competing for carrion food. Go ahead. The second-level leader of the people hunting crowd yelled. Hiss. All the hunters raised their heads and hissed, as if responding to the leader's call. It can be clearly seen from the sky that at this time, Lion Town is the center, and more people are starting to surround it from all directions. Not only Lion Town, but also the other small towns are like isolated islands in the sea, crumbling. Have you contacted the people in Do Town? Dongpi Lan asked in a deep voice, staring at the running communications personnel. No, the signal was interfered so much that we couldn't hear any sound at all. The communication personnel were trained by Mei Long. Although their skills were quite good, they had no choice but to reply to the leader due to lack of good equipment. Are they also in bad luck in Do Town? Dongpi Lan murmured. Don't worry about it. It's only as long as you can last, Mei Long whispered from the side. Isn't that galleon out yet? Still in the basement. I don't know what he is doing. Dongpi Lan shook his head. I asked people to stay near him. As soon as he comes out, we will know immediately. You can't place all your hopes on him alone, Mei Long whispered. Do we still have a choice? Dongpi Lan smiled bitterly. If it weren't for the fact that there was no other way, who would place their hopes on someone they just met not long ago? How about digging a tunnel? Mei Long suggested. We don't have the energy and time, and if what you said is true, the human hunters originally emerged from the underground cracks, then it will probably be even worse if we dig the tunnel, Dongpi Lan said helplessly. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 937. Dong Pilan looked at the sparse figures of people monitoring this place in the distance and sighed. She looked back at the people guarding the wall. There were only a dozen or so people left, and all of them were a little haggard and lifeless. Although they had eaten well and had a good meal, that was the original portion of the dead. He is about to die now, and he may not survive until tomorrow, so there is no point in saving food anymore. If the invisible man hunts again, I'm afraid the number will be slightly larger, and everyone will die, Mei Long said tiredly from the side. Dong Pilan nodded and stopped talking. She was actually very tired. If it weren't for the little hope that Garen had, she might not be able to hold on and want to give up and resign herself to fate. Looking back at the direction of the stone house where Garen was, Dong Pilan felt a sense of persistence in his heart again. Never give up until the end. She recalled what her mother told her before she died, which was also the rule of law she relied on to survive in the radiation belt. In the basement. After 1 hour. Garen carefully looked at the bloody creatures that were taking shape in the biochemical pool. It was a wolf-dog-like animal about 1.6 meters long. It seemed to have only a trunk, and the limbs were not fully developed. There was no skin, and the whole body was bloody, like a wild dog that was just skinned. But what impressed Garen deeply was the pair of eyes, which were so green that they looked very penetrating. He looked up at the timetable he had just brought in. It's been 1 hour. The theoretical time is up, but it hasn't been completed yet. It may be because the cultivation environment is not ideal enough, the quality of the biochemical fluid is insufficient, and other reasons. He murmured and counted the hours. The color of the biochemical fluid seems to be slightly lighter at this time, and it does not look as strong as it was at the beginning. He continued to wait, his eyes never leaving the biochemical pool. Watching the wild wolf's limbs begin to lengthen and become fully developed, then its tail, and then slowly begin to be covered with black skin. Ouch! A black wolf slowly climbed up to the edge of the biochemical pool, shook its body, and quickly grew thick black hair, and knelt down in front of Garen. At this time, 1 hour and a half has passed since the materials were put in and cultivation began. Garen walked over and, ignoring the biochemical fluid still covering the wolf's body, reached out and gently stroked the wolf's head. The wild wolf squatted down to the height of half a man, level with Garen's chest. When his head was stroked, it whined in a low voice without any resistance. Garen observed the wild wolf carefully. This guy looked the same as an ordinary wild wolf, except that his claws were sharper and his body was stronger. He seemed to have good fighting ability. It can be understood by imagination. If it is really just an ordinary wild wolf, it is impossible to get a first-level combat effectiveness assessment. After all, the standard for level 1 is a mech piloted by a standard level 1 pilot. The next step is the most critical step. Garen began to feel nervous. Although the wild wolf is just an ordinary first-level basic cannon fodder, its combat effectiveness is about the same as that of a first-level mechanized soldier, or even weaker. In fact, only 2 wild wolves can barely compete with 1 mecha. But if the seeds of distortion are added, a mouth-like opening slowly opened in the palm of Garen's outstretched hand, and a large number of blue threads swarmed out of it. In the center of the thread, a twisted and squirming blue flesh ball slowly emerged. When stroking the wild wolf's head, silently touch the top of its head between its ears. Hiss! The twisted seed penetrated in at once, as if it were illusory, and penetrated directly through the wild wolf's skull. Woo! The wild wolf suddenly froze, his eyes began to bulge slightly, and his green eyes began to become thick with red bloodshot eyes. The entire body also began to slowly expand, the claws continued to lengthen, became thicker and harder, the back vaguely arched the outline of 2 strong muscles, and the ears became hairier and longer. The entire body length has been extended to nearly 2 meters. The unit parasitized by the twisted seed will have its original quality increased by 3 times. I don't know how strong the wild wolf will be after the increase. Garen looked at the wild wolf after the transformation. From now on, this kind of increased unit will be called the big wild wolf. Never mind. He simply named it. Squat down. He gave direct orders. The big bad wolf squatted down and was very obedient. Apparently, the distortion seed had not affected the control center in its brain. That is the most critical core for the cannon master to control the cannon fodder unit, which is the same as what Galen deduced before. The big bad wolf not only received the powerful amplification of the twisted seed, but also perfectly obtained the brain control of the mechanic master. The trouble now is that the twisted seeds are not limited by quantity. You can develop as many as you want, but control is a big problem. As for the cannon fodder units of the cannon master, the number is severely limited, but there is no problem in control. Quantity and control, how to achieve the best balance between the two, Garen was lost in thought. If he abandons control, he can create as many big bad wolves as he wants without any restrictions, as long as he has the materials and biochemical fluid. It is completely unrestricted by the upper limit of the control number of the mechanic. And if he wants absolute control, he will naturally not be able to increase the number, because he can only control one big wild wolf now due to the mark of the mechanic master. The level of the mechanicist increases the maximum number of heads that can be controlled every 2 levels. In other words, the second level controls 1 head, the fourth level controls 2 heads, the inheritance level controls 3 heads, and so on. Of course, because the number is limited, most people will choose to continuously strengthen the unit creatures they control and make them as powerful as possible. Take the elite route. There are actually some mechanics who take the group fight route, but the cannon fodder's individual strength cannot be improved. This is also a very cost-effective route that is very cost-effective and is not affected by the environment. The group route is to implant a separate control chip into each cannon fodder unit. The advantage of this is that it does not have to be completely borne by the energy mark, but the disadvantage is that there is no increase in the energy mark. Because the energy mechanic training method can increase the power of the units you control at each level. Just like the NIS training method practiced by Garen, each level can increase the speed and basic defense of the units he controls by 0.5. In this way, compared with ordinary cannon fodder wolves, the wolves controlled by Garen can now the speed and basic defense are improved by 1 level, and the combat effectiveness is greatly enhanced. Of course, if you encounter such a wild wolf created by the same second level energy weapon master, it will be almost the same. Quantity. What I need now is a controllable quantity. Garen stared at the big wild wolf in front of him and lost in thought. He was once the top master of biochemistry in the totem world. He also had a world's worth of accumulated and civilized knowledge about biological gene cultivation, and he had many more different development ideas than scientists in this world. The limit on the quantity is the upper limit of the control of the exercise method. If you want to increase the number, you must either increase the level of the exercise method or weaken the amount of exercise method consciousness required to control one end. Originally, it would take 1 unit of consciousness to control one end. If I can reduce the cost to 0.5 units, I can control both ends. Garen finds the source. Then where is the key module for controlling wild wolves with mechanical marks? His consciousness sank into the mark of the energy machine, and he began to search for relevant modules following its extremely complex structure. The energy machine imprint is like a precision-made quantum computer. In fact, it has traces to follow, and the major modules have a clear division of labor. Garen quickly found the module according to the recorded information in the energy mechanic training method. The energy machine mark is divided into 2 parts, the calculation part and the production part. The control module is in the production part. It is a very small black box-like encryption block. There are many thin lines protruding from it, which are constantly swinging softly like tentacles, releasing an inexplicable fluctuation signal. This seems to be the root of what keeps the big bad wolf in check. It doesn't seem like the wild wolf is controlled through wireless signals. Galen analyzed it carefully and came to a conclusion after experimenting with the command several times. Rather, the fixed structure of the wild wolf's brain has been implanted in advance, allowing it to instinctively treat me as its master and obey orders instinctively. At the same time, it seems to have been implanted with a common language system. In other words, these cannon fodders themselves are able to listen. Anyone who understands simple command language. Galen came to a somewhat absurd conclusion, but according to logic, this conclusion is indeed very credible. Can some of the techniques used to control the silver totem be implanted? Garen began to think. The silver totem gave him a lot of help at the beginning. Although it didn't have much effect in the later stage, it did play a huge role in promoting the early accumulation. Today's energy masters are a bit like controlling silver totems at that time, and the effects of the two are somewhat similar. The core used to control the silver totem was Mahakala's deducer crystal ball. The principle of that thing is to control the remote control through a kind of ore called resonance stone. The quantity is very limited. If I can also find the same by replacing it with something similar to a resonance stone, it should be possible to break through this limitation. Garen's heart moved, and he seemed to have found a breakthrough. Totem World Silver Totem uses resonance means for complex control. The resonance of the resonance stone actually only has a few simple combinations, but the people of Mahakala actually use these combinations as basic units, just like computers use 0 and 1 to combine countless various software. They also use this through combination. An extremely complex crystal ball deducer was constructed, achieving the purpose of using resonance to control the silver totem. This set of technology was studied by Garen at the beginning, and he also thoroughly researched it with the help information obtained from the female insider of Mahakala. I originally thought that it would never be used in the future, but I didn't expect that it might be used again here. Although the research on resonance in this world is not in-depth, a lot of materials that can produce resonance have been discovered. Many kinds of materials that he had seen on the computer suddenly flashed through Galen's mind, most of which were part plant, part marine life. He walked out, brought in all the remaining unused materials, and began to rummage inside. Although plants that can produce resonance sound strange, many plants actually have this phenomenon. Fortunately, there are many such plants in the radiation belt. These plants transmit basic information through resonance, including environmental information, survival suitability, etc., in order to make more optimized living environment choices. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 938. I rummaged around and found that this thing is quite common in this world. The development of science and technology is jaw-dropping for the inner research of anything. Resonance research naturally exists in this world, but it is far from developed to the point of using resonance weaving programs. It's cutting edge, because now physicists are already studying more advanced photonic computers, which use pure light matter as the core component of computer calculations. Compared with quantum computers, the concept of photonic computers is different from quantum computers. Quantum computers have the advantage of solving problems with a large number of complex variables, as well as modular computing, which uses quantum modules as units. In fact, it also involves a separate principle in resonance such as quantum entanglement. It's just that it's not as developed as the totem world's use of resonance. The advantage of photonic computers is that they greatly increase the computing speed based on traditional computers, reduce energy consumption, and the computing speed is much higher than before. It can calculate many tasks at the same time, and its error correction is also very strong. Even if there is a little error or omission in the middle, it will not be affected. The final calculation results show that with such a higher-end development goal, physicists and electronics scientists will naturally not turn their attention back to resonance research with less obvious prospects. Although resonance research is of great benefit to ultra-long-distance communication, ultra-long-distance transmission has long been realized by the matter-energy conversion equation, and there is no need for this research. Converting matter directly into energy, sending it directly to the destination through long-distance jump space technology, and then reducing it back to matter is much better than backward technologies such as resonance. After coming back to his senses, Garin carefully found a stone with fiery red patterns that resembled a bird's egg from a pile of materials. The stone was very small, only about the size of a fingernail. It seemed to be the egg of some insect. Garin shook the stone and lightly smashed it on his fist. A crack suddenly appeared on the surface of the stone. That's it, the resonance substitute, the hardened root mass of the plant. Garin is not only a martial artist, but also a powerful scientist and experimenter. Using resonance technology to create cores and control multiple cannon fodder creatures at the same time was something he dared to think about, and it was in a place like this where there were no high-tech instruments. This project cannot be completed in a day or two. Garin put the rhizome aside and suddenly woke up from his feverish thoughts of transformation. In this case, then I will identify the signals released by the energy weapon mark, and then reduce them to only a small part of the main control signals, right? Although this will affect the intelligence and logical thinking of the big bad wolf, it will also significantly affect the intelligence and logical thinking of the big bad wolf. To increase the amount it can control. Garin once received a training method for masters or ancient modulators from the Glory Nobles, the Brilliant Light. There is some relevant information explained above. Reduce the control over a single unit, spread it out, and increase the quantity as much as possible. Garin's consciousness sneaked into his energy mark and began to gradually analyze the functions and concepts corresponding to each signal. There seemed to be many tentacles popping up in the energy mark, each tentacle has a different color. When the cannon fodder creature sees a tentacle appear, it will receive instructions to perform corresponding activities. This is the technology of identifying and encrypting instructions using light. Of course, this is just a metaphor, and the real process is more complicated. But for the current Garin, with the help of the energy mechanic mark, his computing power has tripled. Originally, his computing power was much higher than that of the average mechanic master. Another 3 times the increase, this speed is simply beyond what anyone can imagine. In just over 2 hours, Garin completely analyzed the extremely complex signal and divided it into many parts. The consciousness consumption of the main control part only took up 1/10 of the energy mark control module. Most of the rest of the controls are useless idle controls, such as control of eating, control of excretion, control of sleep, and even play treatment as pets, etc. These parts of galleons can be used as twisted seeds. The instinct acts as a substitute and is even more powerful. Directly turn off some useless parts, leaving only the basic main control functions, including attack, stop, free movement, rest, and a few basic commands. This also saves most of the control module consumption. After using his consciousness to trim the mark of the energy weapon again, Garin suddenly felt that his control over the big bad wolf was much weaker. Sit down. Garin shouted to the big bad wolf in a low voice. No response. This guy was still standing exactly where he was, sticking out his tongue from time to time and staring at Garin with a look of disdain. Rest. Garin tried again. Now there is a reaction. After turning around in a circle, the big bad wolf found a place that looked comfortable and lay down. His whole body softened and he quickly entered a state of rest. Sure enough, control eliminates a lot of pruning. In this way, maybe we can try to control more than one. Garin once again turned his attention to the biochemical pool. Suddenly there was a slight vibration outside again. Something happened again. Garin gave the big bad wolf a command to follow him. One person and one wolf ran out of the basement. From a distance, he saw someone yelling faintly in the direction of the gate wall directly in front of him. The two people on the right who seemed to be guarding the gallon basement rushed out and ran towards the wall. What happened? Garen rushed over and grabbed someone and asked. The man was startled by the big wolf first, and then he was about to raise his gun to shoot, but was immediately pressed down by Garen. "This is my pet. Come back, what happened?" "It's the invisible manhunter, coming in again." The man couldn't break free from Garen's arm, and his face turned red. "Let me go. I'm going to save people," he yelled. "Are you going to save people or are you looking for death?" Garen said coldly. He looked back at the big bad wolf following him, and quickly numbered it as number 1 in his mind. "Follow him and attack this creature." Garen directly transmitted the image of the human hunter through his consciousness, including the invisible manhunter. The big bad wolf let out a low growl and followed behind the man. Garen then let go of the man and let him run towards the gate wall. He was always paying attention to the surroundings in case someone shot the big bad wolf by mistake. There were originally 34 citizens in Lion Town, but now there were only 7 or 8 left. Including Dongpilan and Mei Long, there were exactly 10 people. Standing on the wall, they looked sparse and deserted, and the huge town that could accommodate hundreds of people was too small in comparison. At this time, a group of people stood on the wall of the main entrance, holding weapons and guarding the bottom, but most of them had despair in their eyes. 10 people were not even enough to defend the town's wall. If you can defend the front, you cannot defend the rear. When Garen ran over with 2 people and a big wild wolf, everyone was in a daze. The big wild wolf followed Garen closely. It seemed to be nearly 2 meters long and ferocious in appearance. It was similar to an ordinary mutant beast, and it did not attack people at all. But no one remembered that anyone in the town had such a ferocious big wolf dog. Only Mei Long and Dongpilan had a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Dongpilan took the initiative to get off the wall and came up to Galen. "Is this the hope you're talking about?" she asked in a low voice. "Yes," Garen nodded, "there won't be just one. He can replace the dead manpower and patrol the town. Moreover, it is very fast and can last for a long time. One can be used as at least 2 people." There was a hint of joy in Dongpilan's eyes. "How many more can you get?" "It depends on the time and the materials," Garen replied in a low voice. Dongpilan nodded and quickly ran to tell others about the big bad wolf. She didn't say much, she just told everyone that this big guy would help defend the town. Although everyone was a little surprised as to how it came out, this was not the time to pursue such a small issue. Mei Long seemed to have a flash of speculation in his eyes. In his 70 or 80 years of life, he had seen similar situations. He moved closer to Garen, and while Dongpilan was introducing the situation of the big bad wolf, he asked Garen in a low voice. "The mechanic?" Garen was stunned for a moment, then laughed. "You know too? I saw it when I was young. It's a very powerful profession that most people don't even have the qualifications to touch." Mei Long nodded. Just when everyone seemed to have a glimmer of hope, suddenly, the big bad wolf suddenly rushed towards an open space on the right. Its sharp claws made a sharp sound of breaking through the air, and grabbed hard in the air. Pulling it apart, something seemed to be caught, and it was almost torn into 2 sections by sharp claws. "Invisible manhunting," someone exclaimed. Only then did the others realize that what the big bad wolf was holding under its paws was an invisible manhunter that had sneaked in. At this time, the invisibility effect was torn apart and directly revealed, and the flesh and blood and corpses were being torn apart and eaten by the big bad wolf. Garen didn't seem to expect that the big bad wolf would directly eat the carcass of the manhunter. This change was something he had not expected before, but after carefully observing the big bad wolf eating, it seemed that the body's genes were more stable, and after feedback of a longer lasting signal, he no longer stopped him. There seemed to be some unexpected changes that cannot be controlled. Galen carefully observed the behavior of the big wild wolf eating the human hunter to see if it had any signs of being deeply infected by the radiation bacteria on the human hunter. It seemed that because of the twisted seed, the big bad wolf showed no signs of being infected at all. He devoured most of the human body in a few big mouthfuls, chewing up even the bones and swallowing them without wasting any. Hunt freely, but not outside this range. Garen set an order for the big bad wolf to hunt freely only within the town, and asked it to find a place to rest when it got tired. Watching the big bad wolf leap a few times, it quickly disappeared behind a stone house in the town. Tear. There was another low scream, and another invisible human hunter was killed. This made the remaining survivors feel chilled and gradually felt a sense of security that they had not seen for a long time. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 939. With this big guy, we can relax a little bit, Mei Long murmured in a low voice. Yes, it can hunt people by smell. It also has night vision and is very fast. It can patrol the entire town in a few minutes, Garen nodded. At this time, even though it was already one day before the large army of human hunters arrived, heavy pressure was placed on everyone, but after seeing this powerful new force joining their own team, hunting invisible human hunters everywhere, there was a deep hope in everyone's heart. No one spoke. The survivors just stared at Garen quietly, with strong hope in their eyes. They only knew that Garen was a local who was rescued by the leader, and the rest knew nothing. But this at that moment, when everyone was in the most difficult time, Garen stood up and gave everyone hope. Why didn't you take it out earlier? Suddenly an angry voice sounded from the crowd. A young man with a scar on his forehead stared at Garen with his face flushed. If you had taken it out earlier, we wouldn't have killed so many people. If you had taken it out earlier, would we have ended up like this? The young man rushed out and punched Garen hard. It's all your fault. It's all your fault that we are in this situation. He roared wildly, yelled and punched Garen hard. Garen reached out and squeezed his fist. Idiot. If I could have taken it out earlier, why would you come out and say it now? Garen said coldly. If your leader hadn't saved me, I wouldn't have bothered to care about your life or death. It's none of my business whether you live or die, he said directly without any concealment. You. Everyone listen. Listen. Is he speaking human language? The young man roared loudly. But no one responded to him. The rest, including his companions, just looked at him coldly. No one in the radiation belt is a fool. No one knows what a young man wants to do when he rushes out like this. Maybe he just finds an outlet for his pure emotions. But no one will accompany him crazy. Bar, your sister and father were killed by the invisible hunter. This has nothing to do with Mr. Galen. As he said, if the leader hadn't saved him, he wouldn't have bothered to care about our lives. And Galen the husband has been busy in the back, and we all know that the big wolf dog has never appeared before, and now it has appeared, and everyone can think of the connection. An older, middle-aged woman came out and said in a deep voice. If Mr. Galen could have taken it out earlier, he would have taken it earlier. There were more of us earlier, and with the strength of the big wolf dog, the chance of survival in defense was obviously higher, but he didn't. What does this mean? Does it mean Mr. Galen doesn't want to live anymore? The more she spoke, the more severe she became, staring at the young man Bar. The latter's sadness and anger slowly subsided, replaced by a face full of shame. Okay, we only have this few people left in Lion Town, but they all came back in the worst times before. Dong Pilan walked out and said loudly. Taking advantage of the fact that the people were not here yet and the surroundings were still calm, we must also unify everyone's ideas as much as possible. Do you still remember the last mutated ghost attack? How many of us died? In the end, there were only 15 people left, and the town was re-established later. Yes, all the new ones are dead, and the rest here are old people, someone echoed. Others nodded. Dong Pilan looked around and said calmly. So, now that Mr. Gallon has given us hope, from now on, all of us will follow Mr. Gallon's arrangements. Maybe there is hope to survive this crisis. This is handing over power. Although a town with only 10 people left has no rights at all, it is showing its attitude. No one had any objections, the vote went smoothly, and everyone could see that the only hope now may lie with Garen. This person who appeared mysteriously in the domain seemed not to be as desperate and pessimistic as the others. It was obvious that he had a certain degree of certainty. Driven by Garen's calmness and quietness, everyone, including Dong Pilan, felt much better and regained their energy. Hiss. The sound of a big wild wolf hunting a manhunter could be heard again in the distance, and apparently another invisible manhunter was killed. This makes everyone's hopes grow bigger and bigger. If only there were a few more big wild wolves like this. From now on, everyone must obey Mr. Gallon's arrangements, and my position as leader is officially transferred to him. Do you have any objections? Dong Pilan said loudly. No one spoke up, everyone acquiesced. Now, Jialong, what are your plans? Mei Long opened his mouth and looked at Jialong. There are big wild wolves in the town patrolling and hunting people who may be nearby. Just keep the wall and wait for my instructions later. Garen nodded lightly, turned and walked towards the biochemical pool behind the town. There is still 1 day left before the human hunting army. We must accumulate strength as much as possible. Good. The turmoil was calmed down, and Garen became the nominal leader of Lion Town. Although everyone is still led by Dong Pilan, this change will gradually transition over time. Back in the basement, Garen poured the second batch of materials into the biochemical pool again, squatted down, and held the edge of the pool with one hand. Suddenly, a large number of energy machine-marked consciousness threads spread out and poured into the biochemical pool to form a large line of things like blood vessels. Second production of Big Bad Wolf begins. The second production lasted a full 2 hours. Garen also trimmed its control method, and then gave it instructions, letting it go to the wall to help everyone patrol and defend. After being strengthened by the Twisted Seed, the Big Bad Wolf is much more powerful than ordinary cannon fodder, not to mention the wolf. Even ordinary people, after their physical fitness is 3 times stronger, coupled with powerful fighting instincts, they will become a perverted killing machine. Garen didn't know how strong the strengthened Big Bad Wolf could be, but it was undoubtedly much stronger than the average first-level human hunter. Outside world. When the second Big Bad Wolf appeared, everyone let out a muffled cheer. The huge and ferocious body, the long and sharp claws, and the strong muscle outline are undoubtedly a symbol of safety in the eyes of everyone. As soon as this twisted parasitic creature, named the Big Bad Wolf by Garen, appeared, everyone's faces felt faintly relieved. Then it was lunchtime again, and 5 people were left on the wall to serve as sentries, cooperating with the Big Bad Wolf on guard. The rest came down to eat under Garen's order. Dong Pilan followed the big wild wolf in the town who was hunting the Invisible Man and found a hole in the wall where the Invisible Man had entered the town. After having it completely blocked, there was no safety risk anymore, and the empty hole was the Big Bad Wolf was also ordered by Garen to go up the wall as a defensive force. After coming down, Mei Long and others kept their heads down, drinking broth and eating mixed flour cakes made of dried vegetables. From time to time, they looked up at the 2 big wild wolves that were swimming on the wall and occasionally making low whistles. They couldn't help but feel a sense of security in their hearts. It really feels a lot better to have such a powerful pet defending the town. The middle-aged woman who had previously scolded the young man said with emotion. Yes, thanks to Mr. Gallon's help. Mei Long smiled and glanced at everyone squatting or sitting. Although the atmosphere in the town was much cooler at this time, it was no longer as desperate and depressing as before. Mr. Garen should be a powerful weapon master. I once saw such strong men when I was young. They were so high and mighty that even the pilots did not dare to act arrogantly against them, Mei Long whispered. A skilled mechanic, the middle-aged woman seemed to be yearning for him. Mr. Garin is still so young. If I can also become a magician. A little boy on the side clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. He and another little girl were the only two minors to survive among all the children in the town. Soon another 2 hours passed, and a large wild wolf nearly 2 meters in size ran out of the basement at the back of the town. This big guy came out of the basement, climbed directly onto the wall from behind the town, and began to defend the back of the town. The 3 big wild wolves stopped and ran on the wall from time to time. Their speed was much faster than ordinary people, and they could recover after taking a rest occasionally. It gave everyone a great sense of security for a while. It was getting late, and everyone divided into groups. 5 people went up to the wall to continue the defense. 5 people were left to rest and recover their strength. With the 3 big wild wolves, the manpower seemed to be sufficient. Mei Long took 2 people to collect drinking water from the water purification machine and at the same time repair the energy block collector. Although collecting energy blocks in the town was slow, it was better than nothing. Everyone was busy. After Dong Pilan arranged the defense, he went to the basement and was ready to listen to Garen's orders at any time. By 7 o'clock in the evening, a big wild wolf ran out of the basement again. This was already the 4th one. 4 big guys, nearly 2 meters tall, were running around the town wall, stopping and moving, evenly guarding one direction like an army. This may not be strict for a small town that can accommodate hundreds of people, but the speed of the big bad wolf is amazing. People rush from here to there in a short while, and the distance of more than 10 meters is swept by. In the evening, just as everyone was starting to change shifts, the 2 people who had not yet completely walked out suddenly shouted, "The hunter is coming!" The shout was like a thunderclap, waking everyone up instantly. Everyone took up arms and rushed to the wall, ready for a defensive battle at any time. There are only 6 middle-aged people left in the town who can hold a gun, not counting the remaining 2 children and Mei Long, an old man, and Dong Pilan as the leader, so there are only 6 people who can actually fight. But with the presence of 4 big wild wolves, there were actually 10 people. Mei Long leaned on the wall and looked down under the moonlight. I saw more than a dozen human hunters running towards the wall on their hands and knees. Their eyes were red, and they actually chose the night when the human hunters hated them the most to attack. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 940. Shoot, the middle-aged woman shouted in command. Bang bang bang. Scattered gunshots rang out, and 4 human hunters fell down at once, while 10 more continued to rush over. They moved very fast, each one letting out a deep gasp, and in a few seconds they reached the bottom of the wall, and began to use their hands and feet to grab onto the wall and climb up. Moreover, the manhunter who had been shot down before actually got up again, seemingly only slightly injured, and rushed towards the wall quickly, which made everyone despair. Another chaotic gunfire rang out. This time Ren Xiao was hit and didn't even have to move to fall to the ground, he just carried himself forward. Both ray guns and bullet guns are too weak against them. At this moment, a big wild wolf rushed out of the basement at the back again. This was the 5th one. At the same time, Dong Pilan also brought out Garen's order. Everyone, retreat and let the big bad wolf attack them. Although some were reluctant and some were still hesitant, seeing the manhunting climbing up the wall immediately, the 6 people quickly got off the wall and ran halfway down the stairs when they heard the roar of the big bad wolf behind them. And the screams coming from the hunter. The 5 big wild wolves are like wolves in a flock of sheep. As long as their claws touch a human hunter, they can open a terrible wound. They ran along the wall at great speed, hunting down anyone who dared to come up. a big wild wolf pounced on a manhunter who had just climbed up the wall. Before the opponent could react, the big wild wolf stretched out its claws and grabbed the manhunter and pulled him to the ground. He lowered his head and gave the manhunter half of his body. The heads were bitten off and chewed and swallowed. The other big wild wolf faced the three humans who had climbed up together. It used its two claws, one for each claw, and directly tore off half of the human hunter's head. However, it was also severely grabbed on the neck by the remaining claws of the hunter. A bloody wound appeared. The big bad wolf turned around and jumped away, then kicked off his hind legs, sending the remaining hunter flying high off the wall. He fell hard on a rock in the distance, and it looked like he was dead. The entire back and spine were broken. In less than 30 seconds, when the last human hunter was torn apart by the big wild wolves, half of it was taken away by you and half of it, everyone, including Dongpilan, felt a little stunned. They imagined that the big bad wolf might be very powerful in combat, but they didn't expect it to be so powerful. 14 human hunters were all killed by these 5 big wild wolves, and now they even gnawed away the corpses. When all this happened in front of everyone, the first thing everyone felt was a deep sense of security. "Maybe we can survive," Mei Long murmured in a low voice. No one refuted, everyone was in the same mood at this time. Garen was in the basement, constantly observing the 5 big wild wolves that were released. He found that by eating, the survival time of these big wild wolves seemed to be greatly maintained. The twisted seed seems to be able to stabilize the gene chain that is about to collapse by eating, which is something he has not discovered before. Under normal circumstances, even a cannon fodder unit after parasitization would not survive for more than 3 hours, but he found that after each meal, it was completely replenished, which could extend the survival time. After eating once, the survival time was extended to 5 hours. The second time of eating, the time was extended by another 10 hours. He discovered that this seemed to come from the twisted seeds he had released. "It seems that the twisted seed has many abilities that I haven't discovered yet." He recalled the records and information about the cold prison peacock kung fu. There is not much description of the twisted seed above, but it is true that if the parasite of the twisted seed can only be maintained for a short time, then the cold hell peacock skill must continue to parasitize. How many times does it take to achieve a parasitic level? Considerable enough to cause chaos? Such an ability is simply not practical. Garen vaguely understood that perhaps the creature parasitized by the twisted seed could ensure its own survival by eating, and eating in large quantities. Looking at it this way, if the woman I parasitized last time was lucky, she might still be alive now. Garen was thinking of the woman who was a 5.5-month master that he parasitized last time in order to escape. Then my previous deduction was also wrong. The units that explode after being parasitized by the twisted seed can theoretically exist forever. There is no duration to speak of, Garen muttered. He felt his energy mark control module and found that the simplified big bad wolf already had 5 heads, and he could still control 5 heads. This was his current limit. Unless his level of energy master is improved and his consciousness is further enhanced, the 10 big wild wolves will be the limit of what he can control now. Based on my calculation power, if I can delay it for some time, I can definitely enter the 3rd level energy master level in a short period of time, and then increase the upper limit again. If necessary, I can only reduce the scope of defense. Garen thought about it in his mind. 10 big wild wolves are already a very impressive fighting force. Judging from the previous battles, one big wild wolf can be equivalent to at least 5 human hunters, so 10 wolves are equivalent to the combat power of 50 human hunters. A head-on confrontation may not be able to defeat thousands of those human hunters, but if it is just defensive, if it's a small area, it should be fine. Just defending like this is not the answer. We need to change to a location that makes better use of garrison defense. This town is surrounded by grasslands, and the area that needs to be defended is too large. It is simply not possible. Garen began to consider changing the defensive stronghold. Put this issue aside for now. It is difficult to find a more suitable defense point on the grassland. First, try to use the resonance technology of the totem world. If successful, then fighting each other can break through the number limit and create a large number of big wild wolves. Garen began to use the computing power of the energy mark to calculate the feasibility. The energy mechanical seal is like a computer installed in the brain. It is powerful and very convenient. In addition, the biochemical pool has also been constructed, and Galen also has some basis for research experiments. While continuing to cultivate the big bad wolf, he began to study how to use resonance technology for simple control. Fortunately, the totem world has ready-made information and a large amount of experimental data for reference. Galen only needs to test the accuracy of the parameters and compile a set of simple control devices with resonance as the core unit, and everything will be solved. Time flies. Despite having a large amount of reference materials from the totem world, Galleon's imitation crystal ball deducer still encountered a lot of trouble. The upper limit on the quantity is difficult to lift. He has tried his best to save the conscious control that can be saved, but he still encountered a bottleneck. The main issue is the material. What material should be selected to achieve the effect, what kind of transmission medium is required for resonance encoding, etc. None of these have any laboratory culture conditions. Galen has nothing in his hands. After a period of exhaustion, Garen put down what he was doing and told no one in Dongpilan outside to come in. He released the sixth big wild wolf he had cultivated, then locked the basement door, picked up the key and began to enter the supernatural space. If he doesn't enter, he will probably be defined as breaching the agreement. He doesn't want to be unable to enter the supernatural space again in the future. "Hey, you're finally here," Galleon Xylan in the store bulged up when she saw Galleon. "You came so late. You really came at the wrong time." Garen smiled sheepishly. This was the first time in his life that he was despised by a kid smaller than himself. "Where's Minga?" "I'll go help right away." "How is the energy mark? Is the fusion adaptable?" Xylan asked with concern. "No problem. I have tried using it and the effect is very good," Garen replied with a smile. "Mingjia is inside. Now senior sister is going to participate in the art mechanic art competition, so he is the only one who can support me. There is nothing I can do. Please help senior brother more," Xylan whispered. "Yes, I will," Garen nodded, opened the store's hoarding and walked inside, followed the small corridor to the left, and soon came to the experimental room. "I'm coming," he knocked on the door. "Enter." Minga's voice. Garen opened the door and saw that his real hands were clinging to a large floating ball with his eyes slightly closed. There seemed to be a ball of red marshmallows gestating in the ball, and he didn't know what kind of energy mark he was creating. "What do I want to do?" Garen asked. The first time he started, he didn't know how to insert the work. Within a week, as long as you can independently produce a qualified first-level basic energy weapon mark, it will be enough. Mingjia opened his eyes and said calmly. "You can try a smaller pregnancy ball." The small pregnancy ball represents a simpler mark of pregnancy, but the size is larger. "Well, okay." Garen walked up to a nurturing ball, and Mingjia began to explain to his ears how to start guiding consciousness into the nurturing ball, how to perform micro-operations, and how to finally carve the production part on the synthetic energy machine imprint. First of all, you need to try to understand the object that needs to be conceived and what kind of imprint it is. For example, what kind of biological imprint is to be studied. If you want to learn the imprint of saber-toothed tiger, then you must know the biological genetic structure of saber-toothed tiger well and use your own the energy weapon mark and the brain work together to completely master it. In this way, when making the energy machine mark, you can have an extremely clear understanding of the process required to produce a saber-toothed tiger and cultivate it. In fact, we have analyzed the genes of many organisms to an incredible level, so as long as we remember the part of the gene chain we need to use, remember how they are combined, what environment and conditions are needed to successfully cultivate them, etc., we can find the most cost-effective way to produce cannon fodder during the manufacturing process. Mingjia explained, you can't just look at the power and combat effectiveness. You need to look at the comprehensive aspect. For example, the saber-toothed tiger originally had a genetic aura ability called Wang Wei. This ability can make certain families and genera creatures will be involuntarily afraid of it when they see it, but this ability is completely useless when facing a strong opponent, and it requires a lot of materials to create, so we need to cut it off. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 941. Minga put his hand down from the big ball in front of him and looked at Garen. We need to find a way that consumes the least amount of money and creates cannon fodder that is powerful enough or useful enough. What you are choosing now is a ball of a pet lion. As a pet lion, it is usually used as a pet for people. He needs it's not the sharp teeth and claws with bloody grooves, but the cute and naive appearance, the gentle personality, and the beautiful and majestic appearance. Of course, individual people have a soft spot for beasts. Garen nodded in understanding. So how do I analyze it? What is needed to operate the gene chain? This is the gadget most commonly used by our laboratory's weapon masters. Mingjia walked to one side, took a small white ball from the windowsill, and threw it directly to Garen. After the ball was thrown, it slowly decelerated and then floated in front of Garen. It is a silver white ball, the size of an egg, with something like a camera lens in the middle, which is still rotating and adjusting slightly. The genetic operator is an ultra-precise instrument that can only be used by the consciousness of the mechanic. Mingjia clapped his hands. This thing is worth more than 100,000 crystals, remember to use it carefully. There is a computer operation screen next to it. You can check there are many things you need to memorize for the various biological gene chains you want to query, so I suggest you choose the easiest one to start with. After saying that, he turned and left the experimental room, leaving Garen alone. Garen picked up the ball and played with it. As soon as he touched it, he felt that his right eye was a little blurry. He blinked, and suddenly he felt that the field of vision of his right eye was instantly expanded. Everything in front of him was magnified instantly, as if he was passing through an extremely deep tunnel. After a slight dizziness, Garen saw a little dust floating in front of his right eye. There was a strange hexagonal hole on it, and a strange-looking little insect made it its home, constantly showing a black head in the hole. Is this a magnification effect? Garen immediately realized that his right eye seemed to be zoomed in on a certain point in front of him. No longer hesitating, he used his left eye to locate it and looked for another birthing ball. Soon, he found a small ball that gave birth to the mark of a wild wolf. Among ordinary cannon fodder, wild wolves are low-cost creatures that consume a lot of money and are not very powerful. But what Garen has got now is the wild wolf mark. He is going to study the principle of the wild wolf mark and see if he can find more. A simple and convenient way to limit the number of contacts. I tried to release the threads of my consciousness, and sure enough, the threads that I looked at in the past were the size of hairs, but with my right eye that was magnified many times, they were actually made up of many, countless thinner threads. Every thinner thread can be manipulated. Garen tried it and got positive results. He began to try to manipulate the silk thread to get close to the gray cotton inside the gestation ball, which contained a very primitive gray cell. Oval shape, the cell nucleus inside is like an almond, surrounded by 3 small black dots like satellites. How to operate? Garen took the laptop in one hand. There was a lot of internal information on it. Using the genetic operator requires strong computing power, because it consumes a lot of computing power of the energy mechanic every minute and every second. Long felt like a water tank being filled with water. The burden of computing power was like water being added continuously. As time went by, he felt heavier and heavier. After operating the consciousness ultrafine wire for a while, Garin had to stop and take a rest to relieve his somewhat heated brain. After reading the information on the computer carefully, he found that the genetic information about wild wolves was hundreds of megabytes in size of text data, which was equivalent to tens of millions of characters when converted into text. He needed to memorize these words. Information. So all the energy masters are perverts, Garin couldn't help but curse. No wonder you need the mark of energy to continue to improve. Without the storage function in the mark of energy, most people can't memorize so much information and data in a lifetime. He took a rest and began to carefully let the computer turn the pages quickly so that his eyes could scan and store them into the energy mark. However, the page turning speed was very fast, and most people's eyes could not see what the content was after several pages. This is the part of the imprint responsible for computing power. The computing module has complete functions, including basic functions such as storage, calculation, and transmission. But the things that exist in it do not mean that they are yours. They need to be continuously memorized into the real memory area of the brain. To put it simply, this so-called energy mark is equivalent to a brain chip woven with consciousness. It can assist the energy mechanic to perform various complex operations. But all this is nothing to Galen, who is an expert in biology. He has deep genetic knowledge in the totem world. Creating energy machine imprints can make use of the gene fragments that exist in organisms, but more importantly, through understanding the biological gene chain, one can synthesize a new gene fragment by oneself and embed it perfectly. Cut, add required functions, typify the organism, specialize the functions, and then reduce energy consumption and production time, etc. This is what the energy mechanic needs to do to create the energy weapon imprint. The deeper our understanding of biology, the more we know what kind of genetic fragments this creature can withstand without causing body collapse. At the same time, it also needs to reach a delicate new balance. Galen quickly understood the job meaning. It is indeed difficult to thoroughly study an organism, including its genetic information, every stage of its body development, visceral function balance, endocrine exchange, and metabolism, etc. This is a very difficult task. But Garin had a good foundation in this, and coupled with his terrifying computing power, which was far superior to that of an average second-level energy mechanic, he soon began to try to modify the production module of the Wild Wolf mark. The first attempt undoubtedly ended in failure. But with the stability of his operation and the constant correction of his calculation power, he could easily master such a first-level basic imprint quickly. It only took 2 attempts and it was easy to succeed. What Ningjia originally thought would take him a week to master, he completely mastered in just 2 hours. There is no doubt that Garin is a powerful genius who has invested many potential points in his intelligence. But with the lessons learned from the last time, Galen did not stop after successfully producing a Wild Wolf mark with an energy consumption of less than 10%. Instead, he continued to modify the mark beyond recognition, deliberately making several difficult mistakes. Fully showing what a normal general energy mechanic should look like. It's not necessarily a good thing to be too good and express yourself casually. Looking at the time, Garin realized that more than 2 hours had passed. Mingjia hadn't come back yet, and he had finished reading the information, so he simply started to carefully study the upper limit of control on how to increase cannon fodder. A random search on the computer network revealed a lot of information in an instant, all about how to increase the upper limit of cannon fodder control through various methods. Among them is the single control consumption that reduces consciousness used by Galleon. There is also the use of foreign objects, an auxiliary consciousness amplification device, to amplify, which can also achieve the purpose of greatly increasing the number of cannon fodder. In addition, some people have developed an optimal combined cannon fodder control method, using electronic implanted chips to assist control, which can greatly replace the disadvantages of conscious control and so on. One of the papers mentioned it. There is no doubt that the mechanicist is a powerful profession developed and optimized by ancient modulators. It is also the single combat unit with the greatest potential in history, bar none. Even the most powerful heritage-level pilots are not as capable as the large-scale combat potential of the mechanic masters. The upper limit of controlled creatures has always been a big problem for low-level energy masters. The flow of cannon fodder can indeed achieve unexpected results in many cases. So in order to solve this problem, I am going to propose a new concept here, which is the Self-Shunt Control Unit, or L-Unit for short. This technology allows the weapon master to control a small number of other cores, and then use these cores to control a large number of cannon fodder creatures, and a small number of the cannon fodder creatures can also control the next level of cannon fodder creatures, so that the layers are layered to form strong hierarchy. This article clearly put forward the definition of a unit, which made Galen sigh that this is indeed the age of science and technology, and all kinds of top scientists are not covered by it. What he has achieved is just more than the accumulation of civilization in another world. Compared with these people in other aspects, there is indeed a certain gap. This is a hierarchical control system similar to the army, but it requires a large amount of resources to maintain. Rather than cultivating such a unit, it is more effective to use a large amount of resources to focus on cultivating an elite unit. Garen shook his head slightly. The following are the details of this paper, including the manufacturing process of a basic unit, but it was shelved due to the lack of key core technologies. In the interstellar era, there are too many weapons of mass destruction, and no matter how much cannon fodder is, it is not as powerful as a top master. Such technology has naturally been shelved and no one is interested in it. No one has provided additional research funds for in-depth research. It is estimated that even the author himself has almost forgotten about it. However, Galen read it carefully and found that the concept of this paper was very suitable for use in his resonance technology. Use the principle of resonance to encode a command and control system, use consciousness to control the system, and then use the system to connect other external energy sources to control the large number of cannon fodder below. Perfect. Galen couldn't help but sigh, and quickly memorized this paper, but it mentioned the need for production equipment for manufacturing component chips, safe implantation equipment, and the lack of a reliable control core communication technology that is not easy to interfere with. It cannot be because attenuated by distance. The first two are difficult points, but the latter can be completely replaced by resonance technology. That's him. Garen closed the web page and felt very happy. As long as this technology is realized, the upper limit of cannon fodder control for energy mechanics can be exceeded. In other words, as long as the big bad wolf has the materials, it can use the biochemical pool for cultivation without limit. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 942. After coming out of the supernatural space, Garen was in a good mood. In the world of energy masters, the various kinds of knowledge and inspiration are really different. In this era of technology and the era of the big universe, this kind of information exchange is the biggest driving force for development. There will be flashes of wisdom and thoughts every moment. Continuously stimulate collisions. It was still quiet in the stone basement, and almost no sound could be heard from outside. Obviously, the human hunters had not yet started a large-scale attack. Garen looked at the biochemical pool. Most of the biochemical fluid inside had been consumed, and the color had become a little lighter, but it seemed that it could still be used a few times. Unfortunately, if the biochemical fluid is better, the time to create a big wild wolf can be shortened. 1 hour is not a problem. He sighed, restarted the production of the 7th big bad wolf, and then walked out of the basement. There was a small hall on the first floor above. Dongpi Lan was sitting on a worn-out metal chair. Her long hair was tilted down and she was sitting crookedly, sleeping soundly in the chair. He seemed exhausted. Next to it were several pots of processed materials, which seemed to be newly obtained. I don't know when she left the town. With more and more people hunting outside, it became more and more dangerous to go out and come back. I don't know. These pots of materials contain much of her efforts and hardships. Garen felt a little emotional, looking at Dongpilan's sideways figure and delicate face. If such a beauty were to return to the territory, she would definitely be supported by others and live like a canary all day long, right? She worked hard to become the leader of a town in the radiation belt outside. It has to be said that with the same talent and conditions, the difference between people, the gap is largely determined by the environment. Seeing that Dongpilan was sleeping soundly, Garen did not bother her. Maybe it would be a long-lasting large-scale defensive battle at dawn soon. If you were lucky, you might be able to survive. If you were not lucky, death would be easy. Such a scary scene feels too cruel even for Galleons. When we walked out of the stone house, the sky was pitch black at dawn, and even the moon and stars were hidden behind the clouds. The weather became more and more depressing, and it seemed that a heavy rain was coming. Garen could clearly feel the suppressed tension outside. 6 big wild wolves were either standing or lying on the wall, some were walking around, and some were resting slowly with their eyes closed. From a distance, you can see green wolf eyes swimming on the fence. Their presence brings a strong sense of security to the only survivor in the town, like an automatic line of defense. They can constantly protect everyone's safety without anyone's supervision. Garen's appearance seemed to alarm the people outside. You could see signs of gangs everywhere. It was obvious that the people in the town now regarded this basement as the center of the town. The remaining 10 people, including Dongpilan, all gathered around Galen's basement. "It's about to begin," Jia Long said in a low voice when he saw Mei Long walking over. "Well, they should attack at dawn," Garen nodded. The remaining 8 people gathered around, including 2 children and 6 other adults, including the impulsive young man who had a conflict with Garen yesterday, and the middle-aged woman who scolded him. Dirty faces gathered around Garen. They all held the most powerful mechanical bullet guns in their hands, which were small firearms similar to individual machine guns. "I'm afraid we can't defend it anymore," Garen shook his head. "The territory is too big. There are too many places that need to be defended. Once a large-scale attack occurs, the human hunters will not only choose to attack on one side like before. They will definitely besiege on all sides and climb up at the same time. Wall. We can choose the strongest building as a stronghold defense," someone said. "But sooner or later you will be trapped to death," the middle-aged woman retorted. Yes, Garen nodded in agreement. "Indeed, we will be surrounded sooner or later. We need to find a place that is most suitable for defense. As our new stronghold, we cannot stay here. Otherwise, we will all die." Everyone was silent after these words. In fact, they are not fools. Those who have survived until now are all elites with strong force and intelligence. Everyone thought of this, but they were unwilling because of their feelings for Liontown. Take the last path, but now that Garen has said it, no one can refute it. Because everyone knew he was telling the truth. Now that the 6 big wild wolves are here, we can rest for a while, but after a while, we may not have that much time, Garen said calmly, "So I need you all to think carefully. We have to find another one. There is water source, suitable for holding on. It is best to only have 1 or 2 sides that need to be defended, so that our pressure will be greatly reduced." "How about Radiation Lake?" Mei Long asked softly. "I remember there was a big underground cave there." "Caves may not work. Human hunters themselves come from underground. They may have other ways to dig." Garen shook his head. "So how about the mountains?" The person who spoke was a petite young girl. Her face was covered with dirty plaster, and her face could not be seen clearly. It seemed that her face was covered with bloody scars, but she seemed to be well developed and exposed. Her fair waist was exposed, and her chest was tightly wrapped with a white bandage several times. "Then hang down your long black hair to cover it." "Her name is Sinyo." She is the daughter of Sin Kang, the once most powerful hunter in our town. When she was young, she disfigured herself with a knife because she thought her pretty face would bring trouble and crisis. She has a very tough temperament. Mei Long introduced the situation in a low voice next to Jia Long. Don't underestimate her just because she is a woman. Among the adults present, she has the strongest fighting ability. This is considered the #1 warrior with the most powerful force. Jia Long knew what Mei Long meant. The most powerful person in the entire town was actually the girl named Xin Yo in front of him. It seemed that she could not be more than 20 years old. The figure is not the type with strong muscles. Instead, it gives people a very light feeling, which is obviously the direction of agility skills. Generally speaking, by subduing the most powerful person in the entire group, you can easily gain the awe of the group. This is a common practice. Mei Long explained the situation to him in the hope that he could conquer the Xingyo. Xingyo, right, Garen looked at the girl. Where is the mountain you mentioned? I once ran for 3 days and 3 nights in the wild in order to hunt down a mutated beast. In the end, I was accidentally attacked. When I was on the verge of death, I accidentally discovered a natural hazard that I could use to defend myself. Xingyo said lightly. The top of the mountain there is a big disc, surrounded by cliffs on all sides. There is only one place to go up the mountain, and that place is a very narrow canyon crack. How is the quality of the mountain stone? Garen asked with a frown. If the stone is not hard enough, humans can also destroy the mountain structure by digging. That's not clear. Xingyo shook his head. She is not a transfer person in this field, so naturally she will not pay attention to the hardness of the stone. Is there any other place? Garen asked, looking around. How was the ancient city? Mei Long asked. No, the radiation is too great. No one can survive without protective clothing. Garen shook his head slightly. He had been to the ruins of an ancient city once. It looked like a complete mechanical city, and there was even an anti-gravity technology floating airship that was intact, but no one moved it because everything there contained extremely strong and malignant radiation. Even he had to constantly counteract the cold energy radiation before he could pass there safely. Most people would not dare to stay inside the mecha for a long time even if they were wearing radiation protection suits. It is said that there are documented records that unmanned intelligent machines have been used to explore inside, but even drones can only stay there for less than 10 minutes at most, before the entire drone is fused and integrated by radiation, becoming an ancient city. Disconnect. Don't consider ancient cities, they are too dangerous. Garen denied again. Just go to the top of the mountain in Xingyo. Everyone get ready immediately, Garen said loudly. Immediately, everyone dispersed and began to pack up the things that needed to be prepared. On the vehicle that they chose to leave, Garen found a small airship that could accommodate 10 of them. However, the flying height was not high enough and it would definitely be attacked by humans. So how to break out is the key to trouble. Taking into account the human hunter's hardened skin that resists long-range attacks, Garen woke up Dongpi Lan and asked him to find some heavy-duty propellers that he had taken out from the garbage mountain. They were super old antiques only used by rotating propeller aircraft, but they were very huge and enough it is half as long as the fuselage of the spaceship. After grinding the edges of the propellers sharply, the huge propellers at the rear and sides become terrifying weapons that can cut and kill people. The edge of the shining silver blade is a cutting edge as sharp as a blade. Rotate it. Galen quickly fixed 3 engines for ground trucks on the spaceship. The high-power engines were full of power. The modification took only 10 minutes, and everyone was racing against time, and the speed was very fast. Turn around. Garen stood behind the spaceship and pointed at the propeller and shouted. Hoo ho ho. Suddenly the engine sounded, and the propellers turned violently, bringing up terrifying air currents. Garen randomly picked up a piece of wood and threw it over. With a bang, the piece of wood was chopped into several pieces and flew out, almost hitting the people next to him. He nodded with satisfaction, and then arranged for everyone to pile up the bodies of those who died in the battle, and pile them all at the entrance to the central gate of the town. This is done so that these corpses can be used as bait to delay hunting, giving survivors more time to survive. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 943. But no one showed the emotional reaction that Garen was worried about here. In the radiation belt, people are dead when they die. No one will have such boring nostalgia for corpses. Even if they have emotions, everyone can do it. I understand, because there were not a few people who did this in order to survive in the past. The cruelty of the radiation belt has long penetrated into everyone's heart. Woo! The low howl of human hunters could be heard in the distance. It was obvious that the army of human hunters was about to arrive. It's almost getting dark. It's much faster than expected. Mei Long looked solemn. Where's the water purification machine? Move it up, Galen shouted. No one was guarding the wall. There was a big bad wolf here and everyone was here to help. Several people worked together to move the water purifier onto the spaceship, and then brought the few remaining radioactive dried meat and other food. Garen quickly returned to the basement, and the seventh big bad wolf had also come out. This one was squatting on the basement floor to rest. When he saw Garen coming in, the big bad wolf immediately let out a grunting sound. Quickly modifying the order, Garen asked the energy mark to issue an order to the biochemical pool. Suddenly, on the entire basement floor, the biochemical pool slowly shrank, and a large amount of biochemical liquid that was almost used up escaped. The entire biochemical pool quickly shrank, forming a huge black meatball. As time went by, the meatball formed on the ground. The pit slowly shrank, from a diameter of more than 1 meter to only the size of a football. Garen walked over, grabbed it, and lifted it up. This is the advantage of using stone heart meat to make a biochemical pool. It can be carried away. Of course, this is only the lowest level of biochemical pool. There are more advanced ones that can directly enter the space props as a whole and cycle by themselves to form a perfect culture. The efficiency of the production environment is much higher than that of the stone core meat biochemical pool, and the material savings will be much greater. Lifting up the biochemical pool, taking the packing materials wrapped by Dongpilan, and the big bad wolf at his feet, Garen quickly walked out of the basement, greeted everyone who had packed up, and everyone boarded the spaceship one after another. The entire spaceship is in the shape of a spindle. It was originally black. However, because it was pieced together from the trash heap, its appearance looks like patchwork and tatters. It does not have the smooth beauty that a spaceship should have. A group of people boarded the spaceship one after another. No one knew whether they could successfully break through. Garen stood on the bow of the spacecraft and could see from the sensors that there were densely packed red dots all around. This airship can only fly at low altitudes and cannot exceed 5 meters. It is only an ordinary anti-gravity floating airship and its speed is not fast because it is not a high-end cargo in the domain. It is estimated that the price to be spent along the way will probably be very heavy. Standing on the bow of the spaceship, Garen looked into the distance. In the distance of the gray-black grassland, densely packed black swarms of humans are rushing towards here. It won't be long before they completely submerge the entire Lion Town, like a black tide. Looking back, the sky gradually revealed the morning light. Dongpilan and Mei Long were sitting on either side of Galen, responsible for operating a series of status controls of the airship. The remaining 7 people have all boarded the boat. What to do about the big bad wolf? Dongpilan looked worried at the big bad wolf who was still holding onto the wall outside the window of the spaceship. I will let them come back. Garen nodded to express his understanding of the 7 big bad wolves. He quickly sent a signal with the mark of his consciousness energy to let them return to the spaceship quickly. He did not allow them to come on board, but allowed them to follow directly below. The airship is too small and can only hold our people. Instead of letting the big bad wolves come on board and become a heavy burden, it is better to let them help break out below and become a boost for us to leave. Under Dongpilan's doubtful gaze, Garen answered calmly. What a pity, Mei Long whispered. It is indeed a pity. Each of these big wild wolves was cultivated in galleons and 2 hours. Once they follow the airship to break through, no one knows how many will die on the ground. Maybe the whole army will be wiped out. Are you sure about the breakout direction? Garen asked. Dongpilan then hurriedly started to set the direction. It was her first time operating a spaceship, and she obviously hadn't entered the role yet. It took him a while to answer. Confirmed. How many people are hunting in the direction ahead? Mei Long answered quickly. About 2,000, there may be hope of accelerating straight to the fastest speed. Okay, Garen nodded. Once you can't get out, leave the spaceship and walk up the mountain. Yeah, X2. Although they said this, the three of them actually knew that if they couldn't get out and the spaceship fell, they would definitely be waiting for death. Take off. Garen gave the final order. Finally, the entire small airship began to slowly rise into the air crookedly, turned around, and flew towards an open gate on the right side of the town. 7 big wild wolves swooped down the wall and followed closely below the spaceship. Their speed was very fast, even faster than the spaceship, and they could easily keep up with the more than 10 meters tall guy above them. Whoosh! Like a black flying fish, the black airship sprang out from the cylindrical lion town and flew quickly in a certain direction on the right. 7 black dots below quickly followed. In the direction of their advance, there was a large and dark group of people and hunters. Hoo ho ho! Slowly as the airship rushed towards the crowd of humans and hunters, the propellers installed on its sides and rear and front began to rotate rapidly. These propellers were polished, and except for the one at the rear, they had no arc angles and would not produce thrust. Affects the speed and direction of the airship. The rotating spiral is like 3 gray circular shadows, constantly making a high-speed whine. The airship was like a small fish in black water. With one sprint, it dived directly into the crowd of people hunting. The 7 big wild wolves below also rushed into the human hunting group and started fighting crazily. As soon as they met, 7 or 8 men hunters pounced on them, and were immediately chopped into several pieces by the huge propeller. The bodies thrown out knocked some of the surrounding men hunters back a few steps. However, the propeller was slightly overloaded with power. The sharp front of the airship was like an awl. With a pop, it pierced the middle of the human wave, crushing 5 or 6 human beings in an instant. There were also 10 or 20 people who were knocked away. But the speed of the airship inevitably slowed down as if it was stuck in a quagmire. The rest of the people rushed forward one after another, and they all piled onto the airship like dumplings. They were not afraid even if their companions were cut into several sections by the propeller. Accelerate, 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 Garen shouted in the cockpit of the spaceship. Mei Long and Dongpilan both held the handles with crazy expressions and controlled the spacecraft to rush forward. The propeller can't turn anymore, Sinyo shouted from the pager. Hold on. Start shooting off the attacking parts with your gun, Garen ordered loudly. Soon as the gunfire rang out, 7 big wild wolves formed a small circle close to the airship to bite and kill anyone who wanted to attack the airship. The pressure on the airship's propeller was greatly reduced. It started to accelerate again. The heavy machine gun installed on the airship continuously fired out bullet chains and knocked away the human hunters who were flying towards them. At this time, the airship had already rushed into the tide of human hunters for hundreds of meters. And the spaceship barely managed to maintain its own small safety circle from being broken. Although the numbers on the big bad wolf are constantly increasing, as long as they can break out of the hunting tide, everything will be worth it. Roar. A sudden violent roar came from directly in front. The sound waves shook the ground hard. It's a second-level human hunter. Mei Long's face changed wildly as he was piloting the airship. I come. Garen quickly controlled the 7 big wild wolves below him to separate into 3, and pounced directly in the direction from which the roar came. Bang! The 2 big wild wolves collided head-on with a gray shadow in mid-air. The 2 big wild wolves whined and flew back, their heads being hit so hard that they bled. The remaining big wild wolf opened its fangs and tried to bite the back of Gray Shadow's neck, but was slapped away by the opponent, and the entire waist of his body was beaten as if it was broken. And the Gray Shadow didn't pay the price. The inertia of its momentum was reduced, and it landed on the heads of the hunters on both sides of the ground. It crushed the heads of the hunters with the solace of its feet and roared wildly. This was a strong man wearing a gray vest. He was blind in one eye, his mouth was full of densely packed sharp teeth, and his skin all over his body was a strange blue-gray color, and he looked inflexible. There were 2 deep and ferocious blood holes on his chest and back. Blood was continuously flowing out from the blood holes. However, as time passed, the blood holes were slowly closing at a speed visible to the naked eye. So strong, Garen's pupils shrank. The moment he saw this second-level human hunter, he also felt that this guy was not comparable to the ordinary first-level one. For more, he asked all the big bad wolves to pounce on them in one breath. The big bad wolves that had tripled their level were far more powerful than ordinary cannon fodder. Their sharp claws and teeth were their terrifying weapons. However, the movements of the second-level human hunter are very fast, no slower than the big bad wolf. In addition, the power is violent. Every time a punch hits the big bad wolf, there will be an additional violent invisible force, making it unable to get up for a long time, and then he is killed by the people around him. The hunters swarmed up and bit him to death. It was an invisible force field similar to telekinesis unique to the second-level human hunter. If there weren't so many low-level human hunters around, maybe the big bad wolf wouldn't lose against the second-level human hunters. However, in this case, as long as the big bad wolf makes a slow movement, the surrounding human hunters will catch the opportunity and swoop down. Superior. The 4 big wild wolves, together with the 3 in front, were quickly overwhelmed by the tide of human hunters, and their final contribution was to bite off 1 leg and 1 hand of the second-level human hunter, greatly reducing its speed and forcing it to quickly being left behind. He reluctantly watched the spaceship fly away from the vicinity. The crisis of the second-level human hunters has passed, and the surrounding human hunters have gradually become sparse. Their speed cannot keep up with the airship, and they are gradually being left behind. The dual attacks of propellers and machine gun fire also make the hunters who catch up take a few hits. Those who were killed, and occasionally those who were hoisted onto the airship and drilled into the cabin entrance, were directly attacked and killed by Xingyo and others on the airship. Suddenly, the spaceship shook violently, and the dark crowd of people in front suddenly disappeared. As the last few human hunters were thrown away by the propeller, everyone relaxed and rushed out. Finally rushed out. At this moment, a huge roar came from behind the spaceship. It was a huge metal fragment that was thrown out by someone unknown. The sharp edge rotated at high speed, forming a huge and terrifying cutting force, and smashed towards the spacecraft. Roar. Far behind, a man with red skin roared into the sky and was quickly chasing the spaceship. Mysterious Journey. Author, Gunkai. Chapter 944. That's a level 3 human hunter. Oh my god, Mei Long shouted. Run. Garen felt his eyes sting slightly just when he saw the human hunter from a distance. The third-level human hunter is equivalent to the top level 3 pilot. If he had his original consciousness, he might not be afraid. But now there is a sea of people chasing after them. No matter how strong the pilot is, if he is caught, As long as he is not a heritage-level pilot, he will die. Moreover, his current combat consciousness has long since expired, and he can only rely on non-combat consciousness, which is not a system at all. The airship accelerated forward, but it had already reached its maximum load speed, and it was impossible to speed up now. After all, he still couldn't avoid the huge piece of metal that was chasing after him. Bang! After a heavy impact, the rear half of the airship was directly pierced by the debris rotating at high speed, as if it was suddenly embedded, deeply piercing the hull behind the airship, and the propeller that was still rotating was directly twisted and broken. The entire spaceship tilted violently, almost touching the ground. Fortunately, the anti-gravity system and acceleration system of the airship are at the bottom of the airship, otherwise the forward momentum of the airship could be destroyed in one go. Jia Long and Mei Long Dongpilan looked nervous in the cockpit. They had already rushed out of the sea of people and saw hope. No one wanted to fall here so easily. Shoot back, Galen ordered. The people in the cabin behind the airship stabilized their bodies and started shooting back without any instructions. The impact just now killed 2 people directly, which also caused the remaining people who were frightened to burst into madness. They drove machine guns and fired wildly backwards, as if to tilt the sphere. Many bullets were not even aimed at all. The bullet chain of the machine gun continued to rotate at high speed, and the bullet shells bounced away quickly. Under the resistance of 4 machine gun bullet chains, the speed of the third-level human hunter behind him slowed down. The bullets hitting his body kept being bounced away without even a scar, and he was completely ignored. But his speed was also slowed down. After a few times, the third-level human hunter seemed to find that he could not catch up with the airship, and it was too far away from the main force, so he could only turn around and leave in frustration. Black smoke billowed out from the tail of the airship, and after it scurried forward for a certain distance, it finally managed to avoid falling completely. It just staggered and kept flying forward. Until more than 10 minutes later, everyone was still on tenterhooks and did not dare to relax at all, fearing that the sudden attack just now would appear again. But it seems that bad luck did not choose them after all. The spaceship finally completely left the area where the hunters gathered, and everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief until no more red dots could be seen on the sensors. It's safe. Finally safe. Feel. Are you okay? Feel, in the passenger cabin, in addition to the bodies of the 2 people who died and were taken out, there was another person whose lungs were penetrated by the fragments flying from the huge metal piece inserted into the spacecraft. Just now he held on and fired machine guns wildly with everyone. Now that he relaxed, everyone realized that his body was covered with blood. This man didn't know anything about it. He wiped the wound on his lungs and found that his hands were full of blood. Where's the hemostatic medicine? Hurry! Hemostatic medicine. Xingyo rushed over and pressed his wound and shouted. There is an infection reaction. Damn it! It's a virus hunted by humans, the young man on one side who had bumped into Garen yelled and screamed. Shut up! Snapped. Xingyo slapped him hard. Someone immediately brought the only hemostatic drugs and anti-infective drugs. I lost too much blood. I know I can't survive. Don't waste medicine. Feel smiled, with no blood on his face. How is that possible? Feel will be fine with you. Absolutely not, Xingyo shouted loudly. Feel and her had a wonderful relationship. They were similar to comrades in arms. They were the kind of people who could trust each other's back. They are friends by fate, but they are like brother and sister. Feel will always help Xingyo check for her mistakes when she is not paying attention. He's already infected. It's hopeless. Don't waste the medicine on him. This is the property of all of us, the young man who was beaten shouted again. His eyes were red and his cheeks were red from the slap. The side immediately swelled up. Damn it! I told you to shut up. Xingyo kicked him hard in the stomach, knocking the guy 2 meters away and almost falling through the gap in the broken tail of the airship. "Say it again, I will kill you." Xingyo looked ferocious, his body was trembling slightly, and he pointed at the young man as if he might kill someone at any time. This medicine was originally snatched back by Xingyo and Fei Le. It should be used on them. The boy who took the medicine was the boy of the 2 children. He whispered sadly at this time. The hemostatic medicine was evenly sprinkled on Feel's wound, but it could not stop the edges of his wound from being constantly infected. Those edges quickly began to turn purple, lose their elasticity, and began to slowly emit a rancid smell. "Don't waste it." Feel wanted to push away, but was held down by Xingyo. Many times in the radiation belt, a little medicine is the price of a life, so all medicines are more expensive than gold, or even much more expensive than gold. There were only 4 adults left behind the spaceship. The 2 children were not injured because they were hiding in the safety of the middle of the spaceship. If Feel dies again, then there will only be 3 adults left: Xingyo, the middle-aged woman, and the young man. After the catastrophe in Noda's Lion Town, there were only a few people left, and the atmosphere inside the spaceship became increasingly desolate. "By the way, Mr. Gallon. Mr. Gallon is so powerful, maybe he might have a way," the boy suddenly said loudly. These words immediately made several people's eyes light up. Indeed, Garen has been mysterious since he appeared. He was able to use a lot of mysterious means to create powerful beast pets like the big bad wolf to help everyone defend themselves. If he hadn't been here, no one would have survived. If it weren't for the 7 big wild wolves, the invisible manhunter might have been able to eat away and kill everyone bit by bit while they were in the town. It can be said that Galleon saved everyone here. "I'll go find him." Xingyo quickly bounced up and rushed towards the front cockpit like a cheetah. He opened the door a few times, but before he could run in, he saw Garen walking over with a frown on his face. "Stop yelling, I see your situation." He quickly walked to Feel and squatted down, checking his wounds. The injury was on the left side of his lungs, which had seriously affected Feel's breathing. He had to gasp for air at this time, and gurgling sounds came from his throat from time to time. It was obvious that the internal lung bleeding was serious. He checked Feel's pulse. Soon, his breathing became rapid and his face became paler. Blood pressure is gradually lowering. Bang bang bang. With his fingers, Galleon clicked several times on several major pulmonary arteries on Feel's body. He used penetrating and shock techniques, coupled with his own cold energy radiation, to temporarily freeze the blood vessels. "How do you feel?" he asked quickly. "It's so cold." Feel's lips had begun to turn purple. Garen pressed his hand on Feel's wound, and a thin layer of ice quickly condensed. Not only the external wound, but also the internal lung injuries were completely frozen. Within the scope of others' sight, he shot out a thin blue silk thread from his fingertips, quickly penetrated into Feel's lungs and began to swallow up the blood that had accumulated in his lungs, as if he was swallowing it. Snake eating delicious food. In just 10 seconds, the blood in Feel's lungs was completely swallowed up. The hemothorax problem has been solved, but the infection. Garen withdrew the secret martial arts thread of life, frowned and stood up. "I'm unfamiliar with the human hunting virus. I've never studied it before. There's no research equipment here, so there's nothing I can do for the time being." "What equipment do you need?" Xingyo stood up, as if "Whatever you want, I'll go down and get it for you right away." "It's too late to bring any instruments now." Garen shook his head. "As long as you save him, I will promise you anything you want," Xingyo growled, his eyes red and his fists clenched. At this time, Feel was already unconscious and seemed to be about to fall into shock. Garen quickly stepped forward and tapped a few times, using the power of the secret weapon to temporarily stabilize the situation. "Promise me whatever I want," Garen sneered. "What qualifications do you have to say this? Can you afford what I want?" Don't scream if you don't understand. Xingyo clenched his fists tightly and trembled all over, as if a beast might go berserk at any time. Ah! He roared violently, as if to vent the painful roar in his heart. I have only one way now, which can barely save his life, but the consequences of this method are very serious. From now on, his life is no longer his, but completely controlled by me. Galen speak slowly. Moreover, it may turn into a terrifying monster at any time. As long as you can survive. Anything is fine, Xingyo nodded fiercely. He directly made the decision on behalf of Phil, who was almost unconscious. Good. Garen nodded and squatted down. He swallowed a large amount of high-radiation nutrient solution. His body was densely packed with twisted seeds. At this time, he released one at will. The twisted seeds were like living creatures, with a large number of octopus-like tentacles. Waving, Garen gently pressed Phil's chest. Because he was so fast, no one could see clearly what he had in his hand. They just saw a blue shadow flash past. To an outsider, it looked like Garen simply slapped Phil on the heart and chest. Okay, let's wait for the results. Garen stood up. He didn't know how powerful the virus on the human hunt was, but he was very confident in the power of his cold hell peacock. The cold hell peacock was a terrifying cosmic beast that could dominate a world. Although that world didn't know the meaning of a planet, it was also able to. It can be seen how powerful the cold hell peacock is as a planet overlord. If the human hunting virus does not belong to the planet overlord level, then it can only be reduced to the twisted seed nourishment of the cold hell peacock. The effect was indeed very rapid. As soon as the twisted seed was injected, Phil's condition quickly improved. His breathing gradually returned to strength, his heartbeat gradually returned to normal, and the wound no longer worsened and became infected. What's strange is that, his whole body began to be covered with a light gray hard shell. Like a layer of scales. This is a special cell that I extracted from a mutated creature. It is controlled by me and can strengthen the human body. It is fine when it is not activated, but once it is activated, the side effects will be very terrifying. It will directly turn into a powerful monster and kill everyone but me.